Do Liverpool get their man in Alexander Isak? And as you mentioned there, fascinating situation now revolving around Gianluigi Donnarumma. I think it's proving difficult because Steve Parish is a ruthless negotiator and is demanding quite a high price. He has been offered a huge deal at Sunderland. I'm told it would have made him the highest paid player on their books. So the question is, can he get back to the Calvert-Lewin that, 5 years ago was knocking on the door in terms of the England squad?
Hello, I'm Angelina Kelly and welcome to The Window, talkSPORT's daily video transfer update and your go-to guide for all of the biggest football moves. Coming up, we will be getting the latest on Liverpool signings, Gianluigi Donnarumma, plus so much more. And joining me today is talkSPORT's chief football correspondent, Alex Crook. How are you, Crookie? All good?
I'm good. What have we got? 16, 17 days the window remaining, counting down.
Counting down like it's Christmas.
Absolutely. Do you know what? I think it's going to be busy. There's a lot of teams in the Premier League, particularly those sort of mid-ranking sides. I think your Fulhams, your Crystal Palaces, maybe even your West Hams, who haven't been that active in the market so far. And I think that could change. And of course, there's still ongoing sagas. Will Johan Wissa end up at Newcastle? Do Liverpool get their man in Alexander Isak? And as you mentioned there, fascinating situation now revolving around Gianluigi Donnarumma.
Well, let's get straight into it with Liverpool because it's been confirmed that they've signed Parma defender Giovanni Leone for £26 million. This deal is set to take the Reds' spending to above £300 million this summer. He's Arne Slot's sixth major signing in this window, and this is without Mark Guéhi and Alexander Isak. So if they get those players, the Reds would become the biggest summer transfer spenders of all time. You and I were at the Community Shield. Liverpool, they look shaky at the back. You spoke to Virgil van Dijk. He wanted more signings. He wanted more attackers. Do you think that they will get those extra two players? Should they prioritise one over the other, maybe considering how much they've spent?
It's a brilliant question. I think they can afford to do both because you've mentioned the amount spent, but the net spend is obviously significantly less than that, particularly if you go back over a three-window period. They only signed Federico Chiesa and Mamardashvili as backup goalkeeper this time last year. So I think they were always going to go big this summer. In fact, I wrote about it in my notebook on the talkSPORT website several months ago. Keep an eye on Liverpool. They are not going to let the grass grow. So I think if they can do a deal with Palace for Mark Guehi, they will. I think it's proving difficult because Steve Parish is a ruthless negotiator and is demanding quite a high price, I'm told, in excess of £40 million for a player who will be available on a free this time next year. And with Isak, it's just a case of playing the game of patience, waiting for Newcastle to get a suitable replacement and then probably going back in with a fresh bid. So in answer to your question, they could sign both. They could sign neither. I think all options are still on the table at this moment in time.
And speaking about Mark Guehi, do you think that anybody else could come in for him? Because it seems like he's happy to run down his contract, but will Liverpool come back to the table with a bigger bid? Will Palace maybe admit defeat as the window goes on? Or like we say, is he happy to just kind of stay at Palace for another season and maybe get a more lucrative signing on fee next summer from a new club?
Well, the way I worded it on Wednesday afternoon in my update was that Guehi was content to stay at Palace, see out the season as captain, play week in, week out. In the Premier League and in the Conference League, we know now after their demotion was ratified by the Court of Arbitration for Sport, and then take his chances as a free agent at the end of the season, because it's not just Premier League clubs that will come sniffing then. There's talk of people like Bayern Munich, Barcelona, the biggest clubs in Europe, who will see an opportunity to get a full England international, someone who I think will be very much at the centre of England's defence at the World Cup next summer if he stays fit, as a free agent. So I think he's in a brilliant position. Having said that, if Palace can do a deal with Liverpool, it's a difficult gig to turn down, isn't it, to go and sign for the champions right now, even though he'll have a fight on his hands to get in the team beyond the likes of Virgil van Dijk and Ibrahima Konate. And I do think that will come into his thinking, because I've just mentioned the World Cup next summer. I think it's imperative for Mark Guehi that he is playing week in, week out, because if he does, I don't think Thomas Tuchel has got a better centre-back available.
I agree, and I guess when you weigh up the Crystal Palace situation of being in the starting 11 week in, week out, you've still got European football, even if it is the Conference League. I think they've got a good chance of actually winning that. So it's not like, I guess, staying at Palace is a terrible situation to be in because, there's still going to be a lot of positives to it for the player. But elsewhere, talk about our team, Manchester United. Brighton are saying that they will demand more than £100 million for Carlos Baliba. Now, you've said before, we've spoke about it, you said it would be a big ask to get this deal done. Do you think that Man United are trying to buy him now because maybe other big teams who may want him have got other priorities? I'm thinking like your Chelsea's, Liverpool, who we just spoke about, Manchester City, perhaps.
Absolutely. That's exactly what Manchester United are trying to do. Listen, it's pretty obvious to us and it's obvious to Ruben Amorim. They lack that type of player, that shield in front of the back four, that midfield enforcer. So I'm sure Ruben Amorim would love to get this deal done now, but I do think this is part of a longer-term project for Manchester United to almost woo the player ahead of really stepping up their interest next summer. You're right with Brighton's valuation. They see him as someone who can go on and be as good as Moises Caicedo, and he was sold to Chelsea for a British record fee of £115 million. So I would say it's going to take at least £100 million to get Baliba out of the Amex Stadium. Tony Bloom, the owner, has made it pretty clear, I'm told, he's not for sale this summer. Obviously, every player has their price. So if United suddenly managed to raise £115 million by selling the rest of that bomb squad, the likes of Alejandro Garnacho and Jadon Sancho, then maybe they could make the bid. But at the moment, I think Brighton will hold firm. It's a fascinating story when it comes to Baliba, because if you go back to this time last year, he came into the summer on the back of a not brilliant season. People were questioning whether he would even be a starter under Fabian Hürzeler, but he did start and he did kick on, and I think Hürzeler deserves a lot of credit for unlocking the potential that Brighton always knew was there, and they feel if he has another season like that, that's 2 years in the Premier League where he's established himself, then they can demand this huge fee.
Yeah, I mean, I have got my fingers crossed that it will somehow happen, but you just think, Man United, we've been too lucky. We've had 3 good signings now. We don't want to, we don't want to push the boat too much. Like maybe, we should just be happy with this because it'd be asking too much for us to get 4 really exciting signings. We're not used to even getting 1 exciting signing. It's in recent times. Switching gears now, Dominic CalvertLewin, he looks set to join Leeds United. No disrespect to the player, but how do you rate his chances of really being able to resurrect his career? And I found it interesting that he didn't want to remain at Everton. He's turned down Sunderland. Do we know why he's picked Leeds? Is it just as simple as he really did want a fresh start?
Well, I don't think it was necessarily that he turned down Everton. I think his wage demands were more than Everton were willing to pay. He has been offered a huge deal at Sunderland. I'm told it would have made him the highest paid player on their books. He turned that down. Obviously felt that Leeds maybe were a bigger club. I'm sure geography comes into it as well, and maybe would prefer to live in the Yorkshire area than go all the way up to the northeast. But it's a gamble for both parties because by definition Leeds are going to be one of the teams that you think will struggle this season. Therefore they're not going to create a hatful of chances for Calvert-Lewin, and he's had 2 really difficult years with injury. So the question is, can he get back to the Calvert-Lewin that, 5 years ago was knocking on the door in terms of the England squad? I think it's going to be difficult. And he, obviously, because he left Everton at the end of last season, he's not had a full pre-season under his belt, so he's going to take a little while to get up to full match sharpness. I can understand why Leeds fans are a little bit underwhelmed with this signing, but if they can keep him fit, he is someone we know who can score goals in the Premier League. Rodrigo Muniz was their top target. I'm told they're still trying to get that deal done, but I'd be very surprised if Marco Silva, bearing in mind that Fulham have done next to nothing in the window so far this summer, would be willing to sanction that deal because they're not blessed for number 9s themselves.
And again, I don't want to be disrespectful to the player, but he was linked with Manchester United. I know that we spoke about it on the window about how we maybe wouldn't want to see him in a red shirt. But I always felt like he was the type of player I could see Man United buying a couple of years ago, maybe under an Ole, under an Erik ten Hag. So the fact that we've got somebody like Benjamin Shesho, does this window for you show you enough that the club are progressing and have got a better approach?
Yeah, I think it would have been desperation stakes if United had signed Calvert-Lewin or Jamie Vardy, who was mentioned at one stage, Callum Wilson, because none of those players are in the first flush of youth. To be fair, Jamie Vardy is almost always fit, but the other 2 have got big injury problems. So I think United had to get in a much younger profile of player. albeit someone who's not proven in the Premier League, and there'll be a lot of people who are saying, well, this could just be Rasmus Højlund 2.0. I've watched Shesho a lot, actually, both for his club, and I've commentated a couple of his games at international level. I think this kid is the real deal. I think he's got all the attributes to really thrive in the Premier League, and I think it's encouraging that United have identified the big issue from last season, which was the lack of goals, only 44 scored in the Premier League, and that's where they've spent the bulk of their budget. Having said that, there are other areas in the team that still are in need of surgery, the goalkeeping department, and as I've already mentioned, that holding midfielder, which I think could be a problem as the season goes on.
And when it comes to the goalkeeper, the other day we were talking about Gianluigi Donnarumma. You were saying how much you'd like to see him at Manchester United. Now Manchester City are in the race to sign the Italian goalkeeper. I wanted to get your thoughts on this, because for me, I was quite surprised that he would be a Pep Guardiola signing, because we saw Pep exile Joe Hart for him not fitting into that goalkeeping mould, maybe not being comfortable enough with the ball. And he kind of set a trend for a lot of other clubs and what they wanted from goalkeepers. So for me, it does seem a bit strange. I mean, is this just Pep? He's changed his mind and he's going to set a new trend? How much weight is there to this Manchester City interest?
I think they see it as a market opportunity that maybe they didn't expect. It will depend on PSG's asking price. And obviously they've already signed James Trafford, I think, with the vision of him being the long-term successor for Ederson. But if Ederson does leave and there's a big money on the table for him from Galatasaray, I'm told that would make him the highest paid player in Turkish football history. So you can understand why he might be attracted to that. Then obviously they are going to need another goalkeeper. Now, Trafford, I think, would be furious if, having picked City over Newcastle, if Ederson leaves, they then bring in a new number one in Donnarumma. But this is, for me, the best goalkeeper in the world for the last 6 months or so, certainly in the second half of last season. I take your reservations about Donnarumma with the ball at his feet, and it doesn't feel a very Pep Guardiola-like signing in that respect. But if you get the opportunity to pick up the top keeper in the world, certainly the top shot stopper, for a relatively modest sum, then I can understand why City are looking at it.
Yeah, I guess when you put it that way, when you think about the money as well, if it is a good deal, then it does make sense. And God, Ederson, that would be amazing. It's crazy, the idea of not seeing him at Manchester City. But if it's the right deal, then it's the right deal. I wanted to ask about RB Leipzig's Xavi Simons. He's still not officially a Chelsea player. What is going on there?
Well, personal terms have been agreed. I think Chelsea is still his preferred destination, but all the time that the two clubs haven't managed to agree a deal, it does offer Premier League rivals the opportunity to maybe come in and hijack it. He's a name that's been mentioned to me with regards to Manchester City. I think it might be dependent on what happens with Savinho, but if I was one of those Chelsea sporting directors, I think I'd be inclined to try and get this deal done as soon as possible.
Yeah, you'd be on the phone immediately, wouldn't you? And finally, Roma are in talks with Aston Villa over Leon Bailey. Newcastle want Jacob Ramsey. Will they be replacing these players, or will PSR not allow? And do you worry about Villa going into this new season?
I don't see Villa as one of the sides who will finish in the top 4 or 5 this season, because they haven't been able to spend the money they would have done had they qualified for the Champions League last season. That defeat on the final day at Old Trafford has proved really costly. In terms of Ramsey, I think the attraction with selling him is that obviously he's an academy player, so therefore any money they make, and we're talking a fee in excess of £40 million, will go down as pure profit on the books, and therefore they would be able to reinvest that in a replacement. And Leon Bailey, I think, is someone who's just flattered to deceive, really, since he's been at Aston Villa. So if they get the opportunity to move him on and, again, bring in a replacement, then I think that's something they will do.
Well, there you have it, Crookie. Thank you so much for joining me, for giving us your insight on all of this transfer business. Like you say, countdown to Christmas now. We're nearly there. Remember, the window will be back tomorrow to keep you up to date with the latest rumours, done deals and everything in between. But in the meantime, don't forget, you can also stay up to date with transfer news via Crookie's transfer notebook on the website talksport.com. The window is in association with our own bookie, TalkSport Bet. Download the app or head to talksportbet.com if you want to get involved. 18 plus, T's and C's apply. BeGambleAware.org.